Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. Another great one in store for you. And Jodie, I think you're going to be floored by what we talk about here. So let's dive in.
My
How to
goodness.
discover God's purpose for your life. How many of us really, truly believe that we know what God's purpose is for our life?
Great question. And you know God's purpose to your life for your life, and then you turn 40. And then what?
Well, it's called different seasons.
Oh, so purpose number two. What would that be? I mean, how do you even begin? How do we know, first of all, that we even have a purpose on this planet?
Because there are a lot of Bible verses that tell us so. Jeremiah 29:11 is the big one. I know the plans I have for you. Everybody seems to know that one. Another one that really stood out for me is Ephesians 2:10, and I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. For we are God's masterpiece. I love that, Jodie. When I read this in the New Living and read that, it was like, wow. Because at that point in my life, I really didn't feel very good about myself. I mean, I've never felt very good about myself. It's taken a long time to get comfortable in my skin. So I loved that. But it goes on to say, He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago. And I think there's a version that talks about when he planned that before he even made the world. So to me that was like, wow, he has a plan for me, and I'm born, and now I have to figure out what that plan is. And unfortunately, the way we're raised often destroys the little signal that God put in us to know what that purpose is.
Hmm.
So
That's
yeah.
so true. It's like our soul knows,
Mm-hmm.
and then negativity creeps in or influences.
Yep.
It's like when you see a baby full of promise and their eyes are so bright, and then there's a time, I don't know what age it is, maybe when they're 10 and they start to be a little mouthy, and you see, oh, the world has kind of touched them in some way. They're not bright-eyed with promise and child wonder anymore. They've discovered that the negativity can alter what they feel about themselves and how they feel about their purpose on this planet. That is one thing about parenthood that is really hard when you see that happen.
It is. And to know that sometimes you're doing that to your own child by the words that you're speaking to them. When we're little, we're told, don't do that, don't do that. We we say, oh, we want to do this, we want to grow up and be this. And so often our parents will say, you can't earn a living doing that. You can't earn a living being an artist. You can't earn a living being a writer. And what happens is they're quenching that desire. So there's a
Mhm.
desire within all of us. God's planted that desire in us, and that desire points to his plan for our life. So there are, kids that they know from a young age they want to be a doctor or they want to be a veterinarian. And unfortunately, those things just get squashed down. They're they're not encouraged to discover and explore those desires. They're just steered, no, here's your choices. You choose. You have these two things, you choose. But you can't do what you really want to do. So that's part of discovering your purpose, is asking yourself, what do I really want to do? And allowing that desire to come up within you again so that you can fulfill that purpose. When you're doing things that you like to do you even think about the time? Do you ever get tired? No. No. I mean, when I'm writing, I can sit here and write all day long, and I stop long enough to eat something, go to the bathroom. And I'm not
Mhm.
thinking about the time at all because it's something that God planted in me and I love doing it. But put me down and say, okay, figure out your income and your expenses and how much create a budget, Deb, create a budget. And I'm going, the minutes
Yeah.
just drag because it's something I don't like to do. And so, yeah, you just have to sit down and say, what do I really want to do? And you have to overcome the idea of, I can't.
Hmm.
Why not?
Man, it's convicting to hear you speak a little bit about how we may do that to our own children.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that my daughter the other day said, yeah, I'm not going to do the actress thing because I know you can't make a lot of money doing that. So yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to do Broadway anymore. And I was like, did I say something that made her believe that she can't dream like this? And you do question it. I also think that as a child, we do have like a dream of grandeur, and then if we do fight for that dream and we accomplish that dream, it's like, okay, I'm here, but now what? What is your purpose for me now? Is there something that's next? Um, and so, have you ever felt that way with your writing where you came to this point where you were like, okay, I know I'm doing what God wants me to do, and I've achieved that, or I've gotten to that level or that ceiling of what I knew to be my purpose, but now what?
I'm not. No, I don't get there. I'm not in the now what. Uh, there's a rhythm to life. There's a seasons, just like we have, spring, summer, fall, and winter. We have those same kind of seasons in our life. And there was a time in my life when I knew that raising my kids was my purpose. I I still worked toward the dream of being a writer, and now that I am and I'm doing that full time, I don't plan to quit. I just want to move up. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I want to up level my skill as a writer. Maybe, and like this with the podcast, branch out into other areas because I feel that that's where God is leading me. The opportunity came along and I went through these 4 questions. So, it was back in January, I think, Jodie, when you reached out to me with the idea of doing a podcast. So I sat back and I asked myself 4 questions that I've learned from my professional coach, David Nagel. Um, the one is, what do I really want to do? That's the first thing you have to ask yourself. So when an opportunity comes along and you know what it is you really want to do, then you have to evaluate that opportunity by asking yourself these 4 questions. Is this something that I want to be, do, or have? The second one is this going to take me closer to my goal? So there again, it's very important that you know what you really want and that you have a goal. Number 3, is this in harmony with God's laws of more life to all? Is this opportunity going to bring benefit to people? And number 4, is this going to violate the rights of others? And that is, will this take away their choice? So you want to have a yes answer to the first 3 questions and a no answer to the fourth one. And when you have that, then you can move forward with that opportunity. But if you get a no anywhere in questions 1 through 3, then you need to say, no, this is not the right opportunity. So it's
That makes
wonderfully
sense.
freeing and allows you to continue to move forward into what we talked about last time, being having a life that you're thriving because you're doing what you really want to do, and and you have ways to evaluate things that come into your life and to know, should I embrace this opportunity, or is this an opportunity that's like, no way, I do not want to do this, and you turn away from it.
I think it's difficult too when we talk about from a career perspective. Those of us who may be in jobs right now that are not where we feel like we need to be, or where we know that this is not God's purpose for my life. This
Yeah.
cannot be his plan. I'm working at this low-level job, making minimum wage, tired, sick and tired of being tired. So what would you say to those people who are struggling today, working somewhere they don't want to be? They know that this isn't their dream, but they just seem to not be able to break out of it and don't have opportunities. How do they find and discover God's purpose for their lives?
Pretty much the same way. They need to spend some time determining what they really want. And it's not a matter of, I can't do this. It's a matter of deciding I will. So, granted, I mean, most people are not going to just quit the job and, start doing something entirely different. It can be a process so that you're building toward what you really want before you let go of the other job. That's a sensible thing to do. If you're in a position where you can just say, I've got to walk away from this job and start doing what I want to do, then then you do it. So the thing of it is that when you decide what you really want to do, and God starts to bring to you the how. So you have to be very open. You have to learn how to listen for God's voice, and one step at a time. You know, in the Old Testament, I'm trying to think, most of the time God was just saying, okay, you need to do this. He wasn't saying this and then this and then this and he didn't lay out the whole battle plan. He always just gave them either the first step or the first couple of things, like, gather yourselves up and cross the river. The river's going to stop when you put your foot in water. So
Yeah.
you have to take those steps. So it's not a matter of sitting back on the couch and thinking, oh, God's going to, bring me a $300,000 check in the mail today because that's how I'm going to get started on this new job. It's making the decision. This is what I really want to do. And then listening for what's my next step and doing that next step. And then what's my next step and then doing it. So it's a listen, act kind of situation. But it can
That's
be
a
done.
really good point. Yeah. Deb, that's a great point. It's like,
Mhm.
you can feel nudged, and this has happened to me in recent weeks, where you feel nudged to walk across the street and say hello, or you feel nudged to put a card in the mail for somebody, or go out of your way to make an appointment with someone just to check in, like they're on your heart. You're feeling intuitive. There's something that you feel you need to do. And then isn't it funny how that leads to an open door or an open opportunity to see the glimpse of a dream, or to see the glimpse of some purpose that you would be fulfilling. Um, it's very interesting to see how God works in mysterious ways, and in small ways. He's in the details. How many times have we heard that? He's in the
Yeah,
details.
yeah, definitely. And you say, isn't it funny in the sense that it's odd? And
Yeah.
that's what we have to learn, is that that's how God functions. I mean, um, what was it? I don't remember which prophet it was. Um, it was Elijah he had just, made this amazing sacrifice to God up on Mount Carmel, and all the prophets went, right? And so, but now Jezebel has threatened him and he's afraid and he's run and he's hidden in this cave, and he wants God to speak to him. But God doesn't speak in the fire, and he doesn't speak in the earthquake, and he doesn't speak in the wind. It's a still small voice. And it's learning to recognize that still small voice within us, not the voice in our head, but it's a still small voice that's down in us. And
Hmm.
it can be something as simple as, don't forget to take a bottle of water when you go to church. you know
Hmm.
Simple things like that you intend to do. I mean, I intend to take a bottle of water with me all the time when I go to church. I mean, my church is 2 hours long. I need to drink. And I have bottles of water that sit in the garage almost, right next to the car. But how often do I forget to grab a bottle when I walk right by them? So,
Yeah.
learning to, and that's how God started helping me recognize his voice, was just these little thoughts that would come into my mind a lot of times, like, you better ask Nathan if he's got something running before you reset the router. Um,
Yeah.
because it sounds silly, Jody, but he was asleep that morning when I was having issues with the computer and it was like, I need to reset the router. So I reset the router. Well, he'd been downloading a game from the internet and it had taken all night. And when I reset the router, it broke
Yeah.
that link and he had to
Yeah.
start all over again. So if I had just stopped to ask first, and it was just that little voice, and oftentimes, almost always, that's what it is. It's not this huge big lightning flash. It's just a, hey, you maybe go check on so and so, they're not doing so good today, you know.
Right. And the thing about those still small voices is like with Nathan, that's a relationship issue. Like if you would have listened to God's still small voice in the most random of ways about the
Yeah.
router, then it's like that is building on a relationship. There's a deeper, bigger meaning for that.
Yeah.
Grabbing a bottle of water, not a big deal. But when you get to church, instead of having to run to the drinking fountain, you're spending time with somebody who you can catch up with and say, hey, how are you today? What's happening in your life?
Yeah.
Like, I really believe that the detours that we experience or listening and the intentional direction will put us in the exact place where we need to be at the exact right time. His purposes and his plans aren't just in the big things, they're in the little things too. And so, yeah, from a career perspective, a personal perspective, we can look at like, what is God's purpose for our life?
Yeah.
What is the big picture? But in a lot of ways, it's in the small things that we discover that. I was sharing with you earlier, just in, transitioning in my career, finding, okay, well, maybe I'll just put myself out there and start freelancing. What's happened with that is a simple putting myself out there and saying, here I am, I can interview if you need someone to interview, has turned into me. Now, in the last year, I've interviewed over 65 nonfiction authors.
Yeah. That's amazing.
What?
Yeah.
Nonfiction authors? Where did that come from? But it has been the greatest blessing this year to meet hundreds of people who are just changing the world with these stories. And so, the still small voice, even when you're in despair, which I will admit I kind of was, listening and finding out, okay, what's next? God, what is next? What do I do? What do I have to offer the world? I love that first question. Um, what do I want? What do I want to be? What do I want to have? What am I good at? Like, does something like that bring me closer to my goal? At that point, Deb, I had no idea. All I knew was that I was an authentic learner who wanted to ask people questions and hear their answers for someone else to use. Take the video. I just want to talk to them, So it's really it's really inspiring to have this conversation just about God's purpose for our life, because that is the grand question always. From the time that we're little, I remember asking myself, like, why am I even here? I came from a home where there's two divorced parents. They did not like each other. Why do I even exist? Why am I even here? And I remember asking God that question. And it's good to look back on that and think, you know what? He did have a plan and a purpose. And there is a reason why each of us are on this planet.
Yeah, definitely. And God's purpose is that we bring benefit to those around us. Um, so it may not be in this really big, fantastic way, but we just never know. how we are impacting. I mean, you're interviewing these authors, right? That's a doorway for their story to get out into the world where the people who need to hear that story or read that book can find out about it. So we may have small parts. One plants the seed, one waters, one harvests. Paul talks about that in the New Testament. So we all have a different role, but God's primary purpose is that we are bringing more life to the world around us. It's not that life that we talked about in the previous episode of thriving. It's not all about us just sitting back and gorging ourselves and on the good life. It's taking in what God promised so that we can put it back out to the world and benefit others. And that's where
Which
our purpose comes in. So,
is there any greater joy? I mean, there's no greater joy than to serve in that way.
yeah.
No greater joy. And that's what's money. You know, they say today, that's money. That's money. Not actual money sometimes, but that is money. I mean, it's good. It's good. So I love the subject of today. This was such a great opportunity to talk about this, and I can't wait till our next one.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Jodie.